Okay, hi everyone, I'm Phil Griffiths. I'm a solutions architect with Red Hat. I basically specialise in a couple of areas, which is open hybrid cloud and automation. And I basically spend about 90% of my time talking about Ansible because it's that popular. So I was invited to do a little talk on the role of systems automation inside of an overall business process automation. Presented this a few times to customers, and it kind of hits the sweet spot in terms of how it all fits together. So I've put a little deck around that for you. So the first thing I'd like to say is not all automation is created equally. So who hasn't met this chap here, who basically comes along saying, you only need this one solution, it does everything for you, it is fantastic. Before I joined Red Hat about 5 years ago, this was kind of one of my main roles. I was always a customer all my life. Some of the architecture was brilliant. Under the covers, it was less good. And equally, just because it says it can, doesn't mean to say you should use that. I have a lot of conversations with people that are adopting things like ServiceNow, which is a very, very powerful platform. You can do all sorts of things with it, but you're developing an awful lot of code. So you're doing these bespoke snowflake type approaches when you could use another tool out there that would get you in the game a lot quicker. And this is the reason why I'm talking about Ansible here today, because it gets you in the game really quick. So I use this picture here to kind of explain how it all sits together. To me, this kind of works. So for me, business automation is the conductor of the orchestra. So his main role there is to make sure it all flows, it's all on time, it all works, and your customers, the audience, get a really good experience. They come along, they're happy, they get what they're expecting. So without that conductor, things can go horribly wrong. But he does not himself play an active role in the kind of musical accomplishment that's going on. So that's the role of systems automation. So we have different specialists there, the wind section, we have the drums, percussion. They're there to do a very discrete task, a niche task, and perform it really, really well. So when they do their job well, the conductor can then rely on doing his job really well. It all sings, it all flows. So this is, to me, is what we want business automation to actually look like. And this is why I say some of the, that having that conductor, for instance, trying to do everything, isn't necessarily the best fit for me. So rely on tools that can do things a lot better. If we look at why I'm saying this, if you look at the two, this is why I say all the automation isn't created equally. If you look at what business process automation is about, and then what I call systems automation is about, so automating the nuts and bolts underneath, they tend to be a juxtaposition. So on the business process front, we're generally targeting a non-technical audience, self-serve type thing where they come in and, the whole end-to-end thing is done. This can involve some complex logic, lots of human approvals, maybe multiple levels. So you can't really, you need a tool that can automate and wait and have a human interaction as well. And it could run for weeks. I mean, if you've got a manager that's off on PTO, you may have a timeout in the approval, but you might wait a week, for instance, before that gets auto-approved and moved on to the next level. So long-running, complex, non-technical. On the right, systems automation, we're targeting technical people. The guys that know what they're doing on the floor, experts in their field, know how to automate the bits and bolts that the kind of business process needs for its end-to-end flow. So there's a couple of key things that we really must do here, and if you don't do them, there really are red flags to me. So we need something that's going to be very simple, consistent, and repeatable. So the idea is you just run this thing and it puts you in this state regardless of what state it's in. So we need that to be very, very consistent. And to do that, we need to try and keep it as simple as possible. And I'll show you the ways we do that with Ansible. Generally, we're kind of a hands-off, lights-out approach. Doesn't have to be, but generally that's the kind of methodology here, is kind of like run something and it just gets on with it, it does it for us. We don't need to keep an eyes and ears on it to see if it's worked. And for that to all work, we need something that's very logical and straightforward. So we need to be able to map this out. So to spin up something in like a cloud instance, we need to be able to have the credentials to log on. We need to create like a resource group. We then need to create other things, bolt them all together, present the service, put it in a load balance, or whatever it might be. That's all very logical, and we need to be able to do that nice and easily and seamlessly. And generally, this is not the best fit for a business process automation tool. It can do these capabilities, but it's better handing it off to something like Ansible that has the power to do it. And I'll show you some examples of why that is a good case. I'll just give you a couple of examples that we kind of use. We're using demos and customer visits, just very simple examples, but just to illustrate the kind of breakdown of the tooling. So in this example, we've got basically kind of self-serve like cloud platform. Someone wants to come in and order a Linux or Windows box of a certain size. They've got a form. That's the orange box. That's the kind of catalog presentation layer. That can be part of the business orchestrator, or if you need to have it as a more kind of independent unit, or someone else is integrating that for you, it could be a separate tool, hence the overlap of the box slightly. But someone's basically filling out a form, sending it through to the business orchestrator. First stage then is kind of the auto approval type thing. So can we auto approve it? If it's small, we check, are they below their own quota? Are they trying to order silly things? If that's, if it's fine, then we can move on. If it isn't, then we can just reject it at that stage. So we don't hit the systems automation layer. So if we want to then move on and say, yeah, this is fine, that's where we call out to the systems automation to do the actual nuts and bolts of the technical things that need doing. So we can call out to something like Ansible Automation Platform, which has a REST API. We come in there, we call the playbooks and other things we've got in there to allow us to put those bits together. Test it, put in, we can have workflows inside of this in itself, do the job, and then pump out some kind of final notification. And that notification could be in the systems automation tool, or we could just call straight back into the business orchestrator tool and allow that to do the flow. Or we may want to do it in the systems automation layer because we have some sensitive information, for instance, that we should only pump out to the person who's requested it, or maybe we need to go into the orchestrator to close off ticketing and further approval audit, that kind of stuff. So that's kind of very simple flow. So on the systems automation, we're doing the technical bits very well, very simply and logically, and then we're calling in and out of the business orchestration layer to actually do the higher level kind of process control and logic. So that's the first example. The second example we use a lot and we come across a lot is basically the systems automation initiating a call out to the orchestrator. So instead of it starting off in the orchestrator, we're starting off in the systems automation tooling. And this is quite commonly used here for some kind of flow where we then log a ticket. That might be part of the biggest orchestrator tooling, or link out again to another remedy or ticketing system, for instance. So we log a ticket, come back, we get the reference, we do our stuff in the automation layer, we update maybe a CMDB, which again could be part of the orchestrator layer, it might be a separate tool, and then when we're done, we update the ticket so the orchestrator can either close it off or do even more workflow around that. So there's two kind of quick examples of how I see it sitting together. These are very common use cases, and that's why we kind of separate them out. So if you've not come across Ansible before, it's probably one of our most popular products and conversations we have. And there's a reason for that, which I'll go into in a second. but everyone is using it. I don't go to a meeting where someone doesn't mention they're using it or looking at it anymore. It's quite incredible. It's kind of reach. But we target the automation platform as an orchestration engine for your orchestrator. So your business process tooling is your orchestrator, and we're just the nuts and bolts underneath. That's the way we like to look at it. That's how it's kind of a sweet spot. We can do more with it. People do try and do more with it. Quite often it's not a great idea. So find that sweet spot of what's good in the tooling. So the idea behind Ansible, when it was when Michael Handler started this about 2013, I think it was, he basically wrote Ansible around some of the deficiencies of current tooling of the day. And he had some very basic principles which hold true today. And they are things like simplicity. So we don't have agents. We just keep things simple. You're not writing code. You're writing something called Playbook, which I'll show you in a second. And then we're just calling things in there. It's very logical. It's top to bottom. It's sequential. There's no code compilation. It runs through in the order you say it. So this kind of logical, straightforward method works. It's very quick in terms of getting started as well. So I'm going to show you about 4 slides in a minute, and you would have learned the basics of writing a playbook, and you will be in the automation game. It's that quick. It's repeatable because basically what we have is a model where we can write this thing and run it many times, which I'll show you in a second how that works. And the real powerhouse to Ansible is basically this depth and breadth, which is what we call modules. So modules are snippets of code that have been written for a discrete task. So this could be adding a user to a box. It could be disabling something in AD. It could be adding a DNS server. It could be creating a cloud instance. There are about 4,000 of these things out there. And these basically are just bits of code that we can call with key value pairs to allow us to do that automation. So we're not actually writing any code to do it. If the modules hadn't taken off and hadn't been so popular, I think Ansible would have floundered, and it's the reason why it's so popular today. So just to give you some idea of why Ansible is popular, we have about over 2,000 enterprise paying customers for it now. If you consider that Red Hat is an open source, free software vendor, we live and die by our subscriptions, which are basically where you're paying for support. That's quite some achievement. Those 2,000 customers are managing over 4 million systems with it now, and with system, I mean it could be a server, it could be a switch, it could be storage. There's all manner of things we actually, people manage with it. Like I say, the powerhouse is these modules, so we're approaching 4,000. This is like an exponential growth curve. If we're not at 5,000 to 6,000 this time next year, I'll be very surprised. It's just something that keeps on giving. And we've got, at any one stage, probably about 4,000 to 5,000 active contributors on GitHub actually working on Ansible. A large majority are working on the module front. So you can think of it as a large virtual workforce working on your behalf. It's stayed in the GitHub top 10 since its inception. There's lots of ways you can measure this, but one of them is by contributions. I think we're one of only 3 projects that have been in the top 10 since they were conceived. I think the other 2 are from Microsoft. So that's no mean feat. And it's still downloaded over 2 million times a month. So it shows no sign of kind of dropping off in popularity. So all those modules allow us to do basically all these things. So lots of people kind of have this mindset sometimes that if they come from a configuration management background, then it can do configuration management and nothing else. We see lots of people using other tooling for provisioning, but we can do provisioning with it. We can do all sorts of things because of these modules. And we can do it across all the depth and breadth of the estate. So we're not limited to servers. Linux, we can cover Windows. We use networks is a massive growth area for us. So we can cover all these things because of the module and the simplicity of the model. Just to highlight a couple of our customers for you, just to demonstrate this. So if I take the British Army, they were basically facing a scenario where they couldn't patch servers quickly enough. They're using Ansible to now do that, so they've automated their kind of flow around, taking applications out of service, patching them, testing them, putting them back in, taking the next one out, etc. They're actually using Ansible largely now, and they're trying to roll that out across a larger estate. The other notable one I'm going to mention here is Microsoft. They have recently decided to use it for managing all the switch network infrastructure that basically sits behind Azure. So this isn't when you fire up stuff on Azure, it's the physical tin it sits on behind that. They're managing something like 25,000 servers of network switches with that now, so quite a sizable estate. But you can see the depth and breadth of the customers here, and the great thing about automation is that there are no unique issues or challenges. Everyone says they have it, but everyone's trying to do the same thing. So it's really easy to swim with the tide, and Ansible will just get you in the game really quick with the tooling and the modules we have. So it doesn't matter if you're large or small, it's relevant. We don't have a kind of niche sweet spot. If you want to manage 10 servers, that's fine. We have people managing over 200,000. So we have the answer there for you. So I'm going to take you through in about 4 slides how Ansible is made up and what it does. So you'll be up to speed, you'll see a playbook, and you'll understand what it does. So the Ansible itself, the basic unit of automation is what we call a playbook. This is just a YAML indented file. That's the only thing that's important is the indentation. The rest is just plain English, calling things in the sequence you define. And within those playbooks, we have basically kind of 3 things. We have plays, tasks, and modules. I'm going to walk you through these so you can understand what they are. We have, when you run it, we have color-coded output. Again, I'll show you what that means. It's really useful. It's really quick and easy to identify what's been changed, what's worked, what hasn't. And the whole concept really, which is why we try and mandate all the modules how kind of adopt this idempotency rule, which is we should be able to write something once, run it many times to get it in the same state. So this could be declarative. So we say, well, we need 10 of these. They need to be load balanced. Bang, there you go. Put me in that state. It will generally only change what it needs to change to put it in that state. So we're not going to kind of be a bit heavy-handed and roll things over. So if we want 10 web servers and we got 5 running, it's going to spin up another 5 for you. The other way we can use it is imperatively. So we just want to be able to force something to happen. So we can just use things to go bang, do it, regardless of state. So we cover kind of all the bases there, but idempotency is a very important kind of element to modules so that we can kind of rely on this kind of writing it generically and running it many times. So here's an Ansible playbook. Here's the one we use in our kind of workshops as a first start example. The whole thing is called a play. Here we can have more than one play in a playbook, but generally people only have one in a playbook. So the 3 dashes at the top indicate basically it's a YAML file, and then we're into this structure of an indentation that we use to call our automation. So whenever you see a name line, this is what we're going to show on the output when we run the automation. So you can see easily what it's doing. So that's completely under your control. The hosts line says that this is our target inventory. So these are the things we want to automate against. So you see here I have web. Web could just be a server, or it could be a group of 100 servers. It doesn't matter as long as it can resolve that somehow. And we have lots of ways of doing that. Then we can target those servers. Become here is how you get privilege escalation. So something like sudo, because for package management installation we need to be root. So we can run this as a non-root user. and then use sudo or something equivalent to actually elevate a privilege to do things. So that's a play. Within the play, we have the tasks. So you see the tasks line there, and we have basically 3 tasks here. So we have one that's going to install a package, one that's going to put some config on, an HTML file, and one that's going to start a service. So we can break these down. These are the logical steps I talked about. So we can do these in order. So it would make no sense to actually start the service first if the package wasn't there, and then drop on the configuration, which won't be picked up by the service because you need to restart it. So it's all very logical. So this is very easy to map out on a whiteboard, for instance. So if you're thinking, well, how do I start? What do I need to do? Just draw some boxes on a whiteboard, and there's your flow, and then you can put them in tasks in a playbook. Dead simple. So that's the tasks, and within those tasks, we are calling the modules. So here you'll see we've got the yum module. So this is responsible for doing the yum package management, and we're passing these key value pairs here, name HTTPD, state latest, so we want the latest installed. So it's going to do it. If it needs to do it, it will. If it doesn't need to do it, it will check and will do nothing. And I'll show you how it does that in a second. And then we have 2 other modules here. So we have the template module and service module. So the template is responsible for taking a file that can be a template, and you can inject things in locally on where you're running your Ansible from, and it will copy it over to the destination directory on the target inventories. So that's nice and simple. That does things like MD5 checksum, so if it doesn't need to change anything, it won't need to, for instance. And then the last module is the service one. This is responsible for doing service management on a Linux box. So that will make sure that the Apache HTTPD process is started effectively. So that is basically a complete playbook that will install, configure, and start Apache for you in, well, less than 20 lines. So you can see, very logical, very straightforward. You can see what it's doing. Anyone can pick it up and run with it. You don't need coding skills. You're in the game quick. The color coding I talked about, here's the colors basically. So if you see a green on the output, we executed it, but we didn't need to make a change. So this would be like the template example. If it was copying the file over and detected that it didn't need to do it, it would be green. You'll see it's a funny color here, but it's normally yellow or orange or something like that. If we execute something and it made a change, it will be yellow. So for instance, if the HTTPD binary wasn't already on that box, it would install it, it would be yellow. And if something doesn't work, it's red. So we instantly show red and we stop at that point. So it's very easy to see what's changed. And you get output like this. So you can see where I said with those name lines, we're showing what we're doing at any one stage. You can see in the web inventory in this actual instance is 3 servers. So we're doing things across 3 servers. And in this case, this is the first time we ran this playbook because things are yellow or orange, if it's coming up orangey on your screen. You can see that they've changed. So this is the first time we've done this thing. If I was to rerun this playbook, they should all be green because they're checking, but we're not having to do anything unless someone's changed something in the meantime. So that's basically, in a nutshell, kind of Ansible. If you come to one of our workshops, we do this in a day. We do basically in the morning, we do playbooks. In the afternoon, we do tower workshops. And basically in a whole day, you've learned the whole thing, and you're very, very skilled up in terms of doing this stuff. So that's the basic unit of automation. What we need to do then is have some kind of automation centralized platform where we can control kind of Wild West. So just like with VMs, you can have lots of VM sprawl if things aren't controlled. You can have lots of automation sprawl if you don't have some kind of centralization and kind of target architecture. So this is where we have Ansible automation platform. So the idea of it is a kind of centralized control plane where people can come in and launch automation. So we have all these different business units being able to self-serve themselves, write their own automation. We link it all together centrally in the automation platform, and then we're good to go. And we can start using kind of centralized credential management, integrations, and other good things. So that's where we kind of target the Ansible Tower platform. And in one diagram, this is what it looks like. So the things I've described so far in the presentations, this create layer at the bottom. So this is what we call Ansible Engine today. So this is where we're writing stuff to actually automate the bits and bolts for us. When we want to scale that out and control what's going on, we put Ansible Tower in there, and then we put all our playbooks inside there. We can do things like RBAC. We can have different organizations with different credentials being able to do different things. We've got all the integration points. So that's where we start controlling what's going on, but allowing people the kind of sandbox and flexibility to be able to write their own automation still. And then we have this new engage layer, which is kind of 6 months old now. It's basically kind of SaaS offerings. Funny enough, we actually have an automation hub as well. So obviously a popular term. This is where we're kind of landing a lot of our content now, in terms of if you want to know what's supported by Red Hat or other partners via us, then it lands on the automation hub. And then we have other things up there like analytics, where you can just kind of point your cluster at it and get instant information. This is all SaaS based at the moment. So we're just kind of playing with the idea and see how popular it is. But that's the whole kind of platform. So we don't we sell it as a platform, so you get all these things. You don't have to kind of pick and choose. In terms of the kind of scale and control bits, so these are the bits that are going to hit you at some point, regardless of where you are on the automation journey. So the inventory needs to be controlled or called from somewhere. So we do this in Ansible Tower by means of dynamic inventories. So we can call ServiceNow, we can call Azure, AWS, we can pull back the inventory dynamically so we know what we need to automate against. There's no point pulling it back from VMware if the VM is in a powered down state. So we know that by pulling that back, and the automation basically won't fail because we know it's no good targeting something that's off. So that's kind of inventory. The integration points. So we try not to boil the ocean, basically. We just call out to the best of breed kind of tooling. So GitHub, GitLab, that kind of stuff for your source code control. We have hooks into that. Logging, Splunk, Elk stacks and things like that. We just call out to that. So we have these integration points that allow us to actually hook into the platform rather than kind of reinvent it. The audit and control is basically our RBAC facility, so you can grant people just enough access to do what they want. So you can have an operator effectively calling something like a Playbook that will log on to an AD domain controller, change someone's password. They can do that without having any of the domain privileges, but they can call the Playbook to be able to do it. So they can do a job they can basically, it would be dangerous to let them do manually. So that's a great feature. This is the plum once type scenario as well, where we can actually land all dependencies. Any kind of cloud provider has an API with CLI, SDK type stuff. You can plumb this into the platform and people can come in and use it rather than having to everyone have that on their laptops, which just gets a nightmare to manage. We do have self-service, so you can access Tower in 3 ways. So you can basically automate Tower itself with Ansible through modules. You can call it through a CLI, and there's a REST API. So this is how you can integrate the business process automation type stuff. Either, I would say, firstly by the REST API if you can. If you can't, you can call the CLI and do it that way. And then internally, we also have a job scheduler, so it's like a cron on Linux. So if you want to do things on a schedule, like shut down stuff after 9 o'clock in Azure because it's going to cost you a lot of money and no one's using it, you can kind of automate that facility there. So that's the kind of how you scale and control what automation needs you have when you get a little bit of a mature level. So that's pretty much it. Just to summarize what I think are the key takeaways. So choose your tools wisely. Just because that tool says it can doesn't necessarily mean it's the right tool. Always use or look first at the best of breed. So what's popular out there? Why is it popular? If it's getting traction, it's getting traction for a reason. This is all common sense, right? But it's a good place to start. And you'll find this with Ansible. Just try it, and you'll see there's so many people using it. It's kind of a good choice. Don't reinvent. Well, the next 2 points actually go hand in hand. Don't reinvent and don't try and complicate things. So if that tool doesn't natively do what you're trying to do, then don't try and extend it. If there's a tool that already does that out there. So that I've come across this a lot with the business process tooling, is you've got the capability to like automate cloud platforms, but you might as well just call Ansible and write playbooks to do it, because there's more people writing Ansible. There's probably more people writing Ansible playbooks for Microsoft Azure in Microsoft than the whole of Red Hat. So you've got a whole army of people there doing that and keeping it current and up to date. So don't try and write your own there, just integrate with what's already there, and you'll get a lot sweeter and quicker solution. And then please look at Ansible. Hopefully I've persuaded you it's kind of a quick and easy, nice tool. It fits and complements business process tooling really nicely. You can hopefully see the sweet spots and just use that to your advantage. So, and with that, I am done. So hopefully I'll pull back a little bit of time. Any questions?
Okay, thanks for that, Phil. I completely agree with you that you use the right tool for the right piece of work, and the IBM workload automation side of things is something that's been running for, in most cases, tens of years, and does what it does. And in the DevOps world, that Ansible is the leading tool of choice. So integrating the two is absolutely the right thing to do, and that's what we'll talk about after lunch. But there is a little kind of confusion and a question around the difference between Ansible and Ansible Tower. Mm-hmm. Would you mind just explaining that, please?
Yeah, sure. So I whistled through it really quickly, so I tried to cover everything, so I apologize if it got a little bit confusing. But basically, Ansible, we have today what we call Ansible Engine, which is, we also call that Ansible Core. It's the same thing. So basically, that's the basic unit of automation. That's what you're writing the playbooks in. So you need to install that on a server somewhere. It needs to be a Linux-based thing. You can't have our control node, as we call it, on Windows. And you'll run your automation from there. So that will give you all the capability, all the modules you want for doing stuff are at your disposal. When you install it, you get the lot as it is today. So that's the tooling you use for creating automation. When you want to then centralize and control that and put some federation or delegation or restrictions around it, that's where you integrate the tower layer. So you have that in. It's a standalone platform. You link all that up to your source repos where your playbooks are. You pull them in. You put RBAC around things so that people can only run what they need to run. So that's the kind of two different levels. So the tower itself doesn't give the capability to write the playbooks. That's Ansible Engine. So we need the engine to be able to create code and tower to be able to kind of control it. Hopefully that makes sense.
And tower's the piece with the graphical user interface. That's the web UI that you can use on top of.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it's basically, the engine is just a CLI. So and then if you're automating across 100 things, you need to install that on 100 laptops. People start installing all sorts of stuff. The idea is you can then put all that together in Tower, self-serve it from there, control it, and then you've got a GUI where you can log on and control and do stuff and configure it. We can use modules to do it, or you can call the REST API if you're using workload tool.
Sure. Okay. So the people on the call today, if they want to get started and actually play with Ansible Engine, they can do, because that's the open source bit. You only need a subscription for Ansible Tower.
Yeah. Well, basically we sell Ansible automation platform now, which includes support for everything. But yeah, right. If you want to start, if you want to be convinced Ansible's right, then yeah, you can just download the community edition of Ansible. It's called Ansible Core, and you get the exact same thing you would with Ansible Engine, which is our supported version of that. And yeah, you can just automate with all the modules, but there's no kind of restrictions around what you get.
Okay, that's great. And chances are, in most organizations, there will be people today looking at Ansible. So by playing with it yourself or looking at the documentation, you can then go and have a reasonable conversation with them about the differences, how the two sides can fit together. I think that's going to be very important for virtually every organization moving forward.
Yeah, it's about finding that sweet spot, I think. Like I say, some tooling is great at a lot of things, and sometimes you just go, this is a bit clunky. Call out to something like Ansible, which is going to get you in the game really quick. So it's a lot simpler. Some people don't like it because it's another tool, but for me, it's like, well, I'd rather manage two tools that do their jobs discreetly and easily than one tool that is just going to be a bit of a nightmare to look after. Pay when they take the choice.
Yeah, absolutely, and having the authority to do things from one tool to another is the restrictions that make sure that it doesn't get out of control. Well, while you were talking, I was just thinking, wouldn't it be great to be able to change firewall ports on the fly from IWS? I'm sure lots of users would love to do that rather than having to wait for their network teams to sort out ports.
We have an example actually of a, I won't name them, but they're a credit scoring company that do that actually. They have a portal where someone can log a request for that type of thing. It basically goes off using Ansible to discover what's already open on the Cisco ACI network through a controller. It then brings back those facts, populates that form that someone started off with more facts, then goes through about 3 levels of approval, and then when it's finally approved, they fire off another playbook to actually go and implement the change if it's been approved. So that's kind of like the first example I used, but around firewalling. So yeah, it's quite common.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, does anyone have any questions for Phil?
Or asleep.
I'm sure they're all downloading Ansible as we speak. Okay, well, that gives us a bit more time back, and means that people can go and get coffee and lunch early. Thanks very much for that, Phil. What we'll do now is we'll start again at 2 o'clock. If you want to leave the session open, you can do, or you can drop off and come back in at closer to 2 o'clock. I'll be back on at 1:45 to 2, so that if anyone wants to have a chat before the 2 o'clock session, which will be Franco and Maria Ludovica, to talk about the integration between IWS and Ansible, and then also the integration with Kubernetes as well, the new job types for those available on the Automation Hub. Yeah, please join at rejoin at 1:45 to 2. Okay, if there are no other questions, then we'll break now for lunch and start again at 1:45 to 2. Okay, thanks very much, everyone.